Modern athletic success requires executing highly technical skills with maximum velocity, often under extreme physical duress in a fraction of a second. To generate that kind of explosive output, field athletes require the absolute force generation capacity of an elite powerlifter. But a field athlete running drills, absorbing contact, and traveling for competition cannot survive the severe recovery cost of a traditional powerlifting routine. The era of the committed amateur has passed. By the time of the 2012 London Olympics, athletic preparation had solidified into a career-long process managed by comprehensive support teams. Despite this evolution, many organizations still rely on the program is king fallacy, applying static, inflexible training templates uniformly across an entire roster. In these systems, an athlete failing to progress is blamed for lacking resilience, ignoring the program's lack of precision. Effective high performance relies on an individualized strategy. An interdisciplinary team places the athlete at the center, adjusting the daily workload to their exact physiological needs and injury history. This approach requires a closed-loop system. Coaches use mathematically rigorous assessments to locate specific physical deficits and then deploy targeted, highly fatigue-managed interventions to correct them. Managing high performance requires the precise application of valid data to control the daily dosage of physical stress. The attempt to quantify human output has a long history, tracing back to early muscle physiology experiments, like A.V. Hill tracking sprinters with magnetic coils in 1927. Today, the objective is to build a robust athlete by identifying exactly where they lack efficiency along the force-velocity curve. This radar chart plots physical capacities across 6 variables, mapping a 3-rep maximum down to unloaded jumping power against a baseline. When points for loaded jumps dip significantly below the zero-line threshold, the data isolates a specific inability to produce force. A coach no longer has to guess if a player is simply out of shape. By mapping the exact deficit, the programming can shift to prioritize absolute strength over speed work. This diagnostic power depends entirely on validity. A test is only valid if the physiological trait it measures directly dictates success in the athlete's specific sport. Without valid visual mapping of an athlete's physical deficits, an organization is guessing at the appropriate training intervention. Even a valid test is useless if it lacks statistical reliability. Reliability is the mathematical repeatability of a performance measurement from one day to the next. To determine reliability, we look at the interclass correlation coefficient, or ICC. The ICC is a statistical metric that measures how strongly units in the same group resemble each other. For clinical-grade athletic testing, a test must score above 0.90 to be trusted. We also measure the coefficient of variation, or CV. The CV calculates the typical error expressed as a percentage of the athlete's mean score. It represents the natural, unavoidable physiological noise in human performance. This scatter plot shows a vertical jump test fluctuating naturally over 3 days. To prove a training program works, adaptation must cross the smallest worthwhile change mathematical threshold, calculated using the coefficient of variation and standard deviation. If a training program produces a physical gain smaller than this threshold, the change is statistically meaningless. It is indistinguishable from random biological noise. Statistical rigor removes the guesswork from coaching. Calculating the exact margin of physiological adaptation provides a verifiable link between a specific intervention and a true competitive advantage. Once a specific deficit is verified, the team must prescribe a solution. The West Side Barbell Conjugate System effectively builds absolute strength and rate of force development. However, a traditional powerlifter splits this work into 4 highly taxing training days. A conventional sport athlete simply cannot survive that volume while also managing the tactical and skill demands of their sport practice. This 7-day training calendar shows the primary structural modification for field athletes, the combined dynamic effort day. It consolidates upper and lower body speed work into a single training block. The athlete moves submaximal weights at maximal velocity. They execute 10 sets of box squats, 5 sets of deadlifts, and 9 sets of bench press, all at roughly 70% intensity. Immediately following the main lifts, the athlete performs accessory exercises in a dense circuit. By prioritizing training density over heavy weights, they achieve the minimum effective dose for muscle growth while simultaneously building severe cardiovascular conditioning. Later in the week, the maximal effort method raises the athlete's ceiling of absolute strength. Instead of a true 1-rep max out, the athlete hits a heavy single at 90% intensity. If the athlete hits that 90% threshold but experiences technical breakdown, the exercise is terminated immediately. The nervous system received the necessary stimulus, and there is no reason to risk an injury chasing a personal record. For novices, or athletes rehabilitating an injury, the repeated effort method is used. Submaximal weights are lifted for higher repetitions under strict supervision to keep technique dialed in. The athletic conjugate system is entirely about controlled dosage. It extracts the maximum possible strength stimulus while incurring the absolute minimum recovery cost. In the lead-up to the 2012 Olympics, an international field hockey player presented with chronic knee pain that made standard dynamic resistance training impossible. This clinical dashboard outlines the interdisciplinary team's strategy. They bypassed painful barbell movements and targeted rate of force development. Rate of force development is a precise measure of how quickly an athlete can generate maximal force, and the team tested it using isometric squat. By utilizing an isometric hold on a force plate, they measured the athlete's exact force output. Because the movement was static, the test was incredibly reliable, yielding a coefficient of variation of less than 2%. The strength coach, physiotherapist, and sports scientist met weekly, comparing the force plate data against the calculated worthwhile change threshold to ensure the specific intervention was working. By utilizing maximal and repeated effort protocols in a static position, the athlete generated the required strength and power adaptations without ever aggravating the knee joint. The success was driven by a cohesive unit abandoning their professional silos to solve a very specific physiological problem. Rigid training templates assume every athlete requires the exact same stress. The data proves otherwise. You measure reliability, identify the specific deficit on the force-velocity curve, apply an optimized athletic conjugate dose, and test again to verify the worthwhile change. Athletic superiority is manufactured through the seamless integration of rigorous mathematics and interdisciplinary collaboration.